Scottsdale, Arizona, June 29, 1978. The desert heat was already suffocating by 9 a.m. But inside the Winfield Place apartments, a cold chill was about to paralyze the world of entertainment. When Victoria Berry, a co-star in a local dinner theater production, entered apartment 132 to check on her friend. She expected to find a man late for rehearsal. Instead, she found a slaughterhouse. There, on a bed soaked in crimson, lay the body of Bob Crane. His head had been bludgeoned into a pulp so unrecognizable that the first responders thought he had been shot with a shotgun at close range. An electrical cord was knotted tightly around his neck. But as the police began to process the scene, they realized the blood wasn't the most shocking thing in that room. Tucked away in the closets and drawers were hundreds of neatly labeled boxes of 8mm film, high-tech video recording consoles, and thousands of Polaroid photographs. The man the world knew as Colonel Hogan, the witty, charming, all-American hero who outsmarted the Nazis every week on television, was gone. In his place was a different man. A man the public didn't know. A man who spent his nights in a frantic, obsessive pursuit of sexual conquest and clandestine recording. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was the final, violent edit of a life lived in the darkest corners of human addiction. Tonight, we aren't talking about the war hero. We are talking about the video voyeur. We are talking about the secret archives of Bob Crane. A collection of filth so vast it eventually cost him his life. This is the 1978 Black File, the death of a legend and the birth of a nightmare. To understand the blood on the carpet in 1978, you have to go back to the rhythm. Bob Crane was a drummer before he was an actor. He had a natural sense of timing, a need for constant stimulation, and an obsession with the latest gadgets. When Hogan's Heroes made him a millionaire in the late 60s, he didn't spend his money on fast cars or mansions. He spent it on the first wave of consumer video technology. He was an early adopter of sin, while the rest of Hollywood was at the Oscars. Bob was in the back rooms of electronics stores, buying the cameras that would eventually document his downfall. But an obsession needs a partner. Enter John Carpenter, not the man who filmed Halloween, but a shadowy, fast-talking video equipment salesman with a hollow stare and a shared appetite for the forbidden. Carpenter provided the tech. Bob provided the fame. Together, they were a two-man wrecking crew of morality. They had a system, a disgusting, calculated ritual. They would hit the bars of Los Angeles and later Phoenix, using Bob's celebrity as bait. He was Colonel Hogan, the man every woman's father trusted. He would invite strange girls back to his suite for what he called cinematic experiments. He told them he was developing a new television format. He told them they were starlets in the making. In reality, he was setting up tripods in the shadows, hiding microphones in the lamps, and recording every intimate moment without their knowledge or consent. He was a man who couldn't experience reality unless it was through a lens. He didn't want a lover. He wanted a subject. He was building a library of human degradation, reel by reel, frame by frame. He was a pioneer of the sex tape long before the internet made it a commodity. But in the 1970s, this wasn't just a scandal, it was a sickness. And like all sicknesses, it began to rot the man from the inside out. His career began to fade, his marriages crumbled, and the only thing left was the hum of the video recorder and the flickering images of the women he had tricked into his web. By 1978, the fame was gone. The big studio contracts had dried up. Bob Crane was a has-been doing dinner theater in the Arizona desert to pay his mounting debts. He was living in a rented apartment, a far cry from the mansions of Bel Air, but the addiction didn't care about the surroundings. If anything, the desperation made it more intense. It was during this final, frantic summer that he met Lana, a fictionalized composite of the many strange girls Bob encountered. Lana was a nightclub waitress in Scottsdale with a face that whispered of lost innocence and a past she wanted to escape. Bob saw her, and the old Hogan charm flickered back to life. He promised her a way out. He promised her a role in a major project he was filming privately. Lana became a regular at apartment 132, but she wasn't like the others. She began to notice the way Bob looked at the cameras more than he looked at her. She heard the way he and John Carpenter talked in the kitchen, whispering about trading tapes, discussing the quality of the women they had filmed like they were discussing livestock. Lana was a girl of the streets. She knew when she was being used. She began to feel the cold, mechanical nature of Bob's love. One night, While Bob was passed out from a cocktail of scotch and exhaustion, Lana found the archives. She opened the drawers and saw the labels. Names of women she knew. Names of women who worked at her club. She realized she wasn't a muse. She was just real 402. The betrayal was a physical blow. But Lana wasn't the only one feeling the tension. The partnership between Bob and John Carpenter was fracturing. Carpenter was becoming possessive of the fame he had helped document. He felt he was the producer of Bob's secret life, and he wanted his due. The apartment became a pressure cooker of resentment, ego, and technological madness. The reels were spinning faster and faster, but there was no one left to yell, "Cut!" The night of June 28th. 1978 was a descent into hell. The Arizona air was a stagnant 100 degrees, even at midnight. Bob Crane had been seen at a local bar earlier that evening, arguing bitterly with John Carpenter. Witnesses said Bob looked haunted, a man who realized his double life was about to collide with his public image. He told Carpenter the partnership was over. He wanted to get rid of the equipment. He wanted to go clean, but you don't just delete a decade of shared filth. Carpenter knew too much, and Bob owned too much of Carpenter's soul. Bob returned to apartment 132 alone, or so he thought. He fell into a deep sleep, perhaps the first peaceful sleep he'd had in years. He never saw the shadow enter the room. The murder weapon was a stroke of poetic, noir irony, a heavy, industrial-grade camera tripod. The very tool Bob had used to record his conquests was used to erase him from existence. The first blow shattered his skull. The second turned it to pulp. The killer didn't stop until the hero was unrecognizable. Then, with a chilling deliberation, the killer took an electrical cord, the lifeblood of Bob's video consoles, and tied it around his neck in a final, strangling knot. There was no struggle, no chance for a Hogan escape. The man who lived for the image was killed by the machinery of that image. The killer left the apartment, leaving the cameras behind. Why? Because the tapes were the real motive. Some of the most sensitive reels, the ones featuring high-profile names or the ones that could prove a conspiracy, were missing when the police arrived. The crime scene was a message. The show is over. When the news of Bob Crane's death broke, Hollywood tried to maintain the tragic loss narrative, but within 24 hours, the Scottsdale Police Department leaked the truth. The archives were discovered. Thousands of photographs of Bob with hundreds of women. Tapes that showed a side of the all-American hero that was so depraved it made the national news blush. The investigation was a disaster. John Carpenter was the primary suspect, but the technology of 1978 was his shield. The blood found in his rental car was type B, the same as Bob's, but without DNA testing. It wasn't enough to convict. Carpenter walked free, but he lived the rest of his life in the shadow of the tripod. He died in 1998, taking the secrets of that night to his grave. And Lana, the girl from the nightclub, she was never found by the police. But rumors persisted in the underground circuit of the late 70s. People spoke of a woman who possessed a master tape, a recording that didn't just show Bob Crane, but showed the faces of the men who visited his sessions. Men whose names were printed on the ballots of America. Lana didn't just escape. She became the keeper of the shadows. The apartment in Scottsdale was eventually rented out to new tenants, but the stories never left. They say you can still hear the rhythmic thumping of a drum and the mechanical whirring of a video reel in the dead of night. Bob Crane wasn't just a murder victim. He was a pioneer. He was the first celebrity to succumb to the digital demon. Long before the internet, long before smartphones, he showed us the terrifying potential of recorded intimacy. He showed us that fame is a mask that can hide a bottomless pit of addiction. He wanted to be a legend, and he succeeded. But his legend isn't one of heroism. It's one of a tripod and a blood-soaked bed. He is the cautionary tale of the Black Files, the man who thought he could control the camera, only to realize that the camera was the one controlling him. Every time you see a celebrity scandal today, every time a private video is leaked to the world, you are seeing the ghost of Bob Crane. As the sun sets over the Arizona desert, the Winfield Place apartments stand as a monument to the end of innocence. We look at the reruns of Hogan's Heroes and we see the smile, the charm, the wit. But we also see the static. We see the flicker of the 8mm film. And we remember that in the world of noir, the hero doesn't always get away. Sometimes, the hero is the monster, and sometimes, the monster records his own end. Bob Crane lived for the lens, and in the end, the lens was his only witness. Was he a victim of the era of free love? Or was he a predator who finally met a more dangerous predator? The Black Files are full of these questions. If you want us to continue digging into the filth and the glory of the 70s, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and tell us who is the next icon whose mask we should tear off. Is it the secret life of Rock Hudson? Or the high society crimes of the Kennedy Inner Circle? Leave your choice in the comments. The reels are always spinning, and we are just getting started. The night is dark. Hollywood is darker. Good night, and keep watching the shadows.